You are nervously sitting in a waiting room. Your hands feel cold, your heart is beating fast, and in just a few minutes, someone is going to ask you questions in English, and your mind already feels completely empty. Welcome to English Chats Daily. I am Eva.
And I am George, and today we're talking about something that almost every English learner goes through at some point. That terrifying moment in a job interview when your brain just stops working.
Exactly. And here's the thing we want you to hear right now, before we go any further. If you have ever sat in an interview and suddenly forgotten every English word you ever learned, that is not a language problem. That is a brain problem. And that's actually very good news.
Because if it is a brain problem, we can fix it. We can train around it, and by the end of this episode, you're going to have a real system you can start using today. Not someday, not after you learn more vocabulary, today.
So let me ask you something. Have you ever had a moment in an interview where someone asked you a question and you just froze, like your mouth opened but nothing came out? Or maybe something came out, but it sounded nothing like what you actually wanted to say.
That moment right there is what we're going to break down today, because most people think the problem is that their English is not good enough. But the real answer is much more interesting than that.
Let me paint the picture for you. You have prepared, you practiced at home, you rehearsed answers, you felt ready. But then you sit across from the interviewer and they ask something simple like, "Tell me about yourself," and your mind goes completely blank.
And you start thinking, why is this happening? I know this. I practiced this. What is wrong with me? And that spiral of thinking, that's actually making the problem 10 times worse.
Here's what's really going on inside your brain. When you feel pressure or stress, your brain shifts into what we call survival mode. Your body thinks there's a threat, and it starts directing all its energy toward dealing with that threat.
And when your brain is in that mode, the part responsible for clear thinking and language retrieval, it basically slows down. Your memory gets harder to access. Your words feel stuck, and you feel like you have forgotten everything you ever learned.
This is not a weakness. This is human biology. It happens to native speakers too. But for English learners, it feels even more intense because you're already working harder than a native speaker just to communicate normally.
So the solution is not to study more grammar. The solution is to learn how to manage your brain under pressure. And that's exactly what we're going to help you do today.
Now, before we go into the practical system, I want to share something from a book that really connects with this idea. The book is called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and one of the most powerful ideas in that book is this: you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Read that again slowly in your head. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Think about what that means for interview preparation.
Most people prepare for interviews by thinking about goals. I want to sound confident. I want to impress the interviewer. I want this job. But without a system, those goals stay as dreams.
And in the moment when pressure hits, you fall back to whatever system you have built. If you have no system, you fall into panic. If you have a strong system, you fall into calm, structured speaking.
That's the whole game right there. And today, we're giving you that system. We're calling it the 4-step interview confidence method. And it's designed specifically for English learners who feel nervous under pressure.
Step 1 is pause before you speak. This sounds almost too simple, but it's genuinely powerful. When the interviewer asks you a question, don't rush to answer immediately.
Most nervous speakers rush because silence feels terrifying. They think if they are quiet for even 2 seconds, the interviewer will think they are not intelligent. But the opposite is actually true.
A short pause before you speak signals confidence. It says, I am thinking carefully about my answer. I am not just saying the first thing that comes to mind. Interviewers respect that.
And that pause also gives your brain just enough time to shift out of panic mode and into speaking mode. It's like pressing a small reset button before you begin.
So practice this right now, even before your next interview. When someone asks you something today, in any conversation, pause for just 1 or 2 seconds before you answer. Make that pause your new habit.
Step 2 is use a simple speaking structure. This is where the actual language help comes in. When you're nervous, your brain struggles to organize thoughts quickly, so we give it a map to follow.
The structure is 3 words. First, then, finally. That's it. When you answer an interview question, use those 3 words to build your answer. First, I did this, then this happened, finally, I learned this.
Let me show you how this works with a real example. The question is, tell me about yourself. A nervous answer without structure might sound like, I have some experience, and also I like working with people, yes.
We have all been there. But now here is the same answer with structure. First, I have 3 years of experience working in customer service. Then I moved into a team leader role where I managed 5 people. Finally, I am now looking for a new opportunity where I can use both my communication and leadership skills.
Same person, same information, but completely different impression. The structure makes you sound clear, calm, and prepared, even if your heart is still beating fast on the inside.
And here is the beautiful thing about this method. Because you are following a structure, your brain has less work to do in the moment. It is not trying to organize and speak at the same time. The organization is already done.
This connects to another book we want to mention today, The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. The core idea in that book is that small, consistent actions compound over time into massive results.
And Jeff Olson talks about how most people want big, dramatic changes, but the real magic happens in tiny daily steps that seem almost too small to matter.
Practicing your interview structure for 5 minutes every day might feel like nothing. It feels too small. It feels like it cannot possibly make a difference. But those 5 minutes done consistently every day for 30 days add up to something powerful.
After 30 days of that daily practice, walking into an interview room feels completely different. Not because you suddenly became a different person, but because your brain has built the habit of structured speaking. It becomes automatic.
That's the slight edge in action. Small daily practice becomes your competitive advantage.
Okay, let me stop here for a second because I want to ask you something directly. Be honest with yourself right now. When is the last time you actually practiced speaking English out loud? Not reading, not watching videos, actually speaking out loud by yourself or with someone.
Because most people consume English every day. They watch shows, they read articles, they study grammar. But actual speaking practice, real out loud practice, that's much rarer.
And this matters because your speaking ability in a high-pressure situation is directly connected to how much you practice speaking out loud in a low-pressure situation. The brain needs repetition to build those pathways.
Think of it like muscle memory. A musician doesn't perform perfectly at a concert because they read about music theory. They perform because their fingers have played those notes hundreds of times. Speaking works the same way.
Now let's move to step 3 of our system, and this one is going to change how you feel in the middle of an interview when you feel yourself starting to panic.
Step 3 is use thinking phrases instead of silence or panic sounds. When you need a moment to collect your thoughts, instead of or nothing at all, use a thinking phrase.
Here are some examples. That's a great question. Let me think about that for a moment. From my experience, I would say, what comes to mind is, these phrases do 3 things at the same time.
First, they buy you time to think without awkward silence. Second, they sound natural and confident because real confident speakers use them too. Third, they calm your nervous system because you're saying something familiar and rehearsed, which signals safety to your brain.
Let me give you another real example. The interview question is, what is your biggest weakness? Without a thinking phrase, a nervous speaker might panic and say, I don't know, maybe I work too much. I'm trying to improve, sorry.
Now, here's the same moment with the thinking phrase. That's a really good question. Let me think for a second. I would say my biggest area of growth is learning to delegate tasks, but I've been actively working on that by improving how I communicate with my team.
Notice that the answer is not perfect. It is not a Hollywood speech, but it sounds calm, organized, and honest. And in a real interview, that is more than enough.
The thinking phrase creates a bridge between the question and your answer. It gives your brain a runway to build up speed before you need to take off.
And here is a wait, think about this moment. What if the real difference between a confident interview and a panicked one is not how much English you know, but how well you manage the first 5 seconds after the question is asked?
Just 5 seconds. The pause, the thinking phrase, the breath. That tiny window controls everything that follows.
That is a completely different way of thinking about it, right? You do not need to overhaul your entire English level before your next interview. You need to master those first 5 seconds.
Okay, let's keep going. We're about halfway through today, and this feels like a good moment to quickly recap what we've covered so far before we move into the final and most important step.
So far, we've talked about why your brain goes blank under pressure and why that is biology, not weakness. We covered the atomic habits idea that your performance falls to the level of your systems. We went through the first 3 steps of the 4-step interview confidence method.
Step 1 was pause before you speak. Step 2 was use a simple structure with first, then, finally. And step 3 was use thinking phrases to bridge the gap when you need a moment.
Now, we are going to talk about step 4, and this one is the foundation that makes all the other steps actually work when it counts.
Step 4 is practice speaking out loud every single day. Not studying, not watching, speaking out loud every day.
Here's a simple practice system you can start tonight. Pick one common interview question, something like, tell me about yourself, or why do you want this job, or what are your strengths?
Then answer it out loud using the structure we gave you. First, then, finally. Do this for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. Then record yourself on your phone and listen back once.
Listening back is important because most people have never actually heard themselves speak English. And when you hear yourself, you notice things. You notice where you pause, or you rush, where you sound unclear.
And over time, that self-awareness becomes your greatest tool. You are not just practicing English, you're training your brain to stay calm and structured even when the pressure is real.
Now, let me bring the slight edge back here, because this is where it really connects. Jeff Olson says that the things that are easy to do are also easy not to do. 5 minutes of practice every day is easy. It's so easy that most people will skip it.
They will say, I don't have time, or I'll do it tomorrow, or it's too small to make a real difference. And that's exactly why most people never improve their speaking confidence. They're waiting for a big dramatic solution that never comes.
But the person who practices for 5 minutes every day for 60 days, they walk into interviews differently, not because they had some massive transformation, but because they did the small thing consistently while everyone else waited.
That's the slight edge. That's the edge that separates people who perform under pressure from people who freeze under pressure.
Okay, I want to do something practical with you right now. Let's take one more question and model the full 4-step method from start to finish. The question is, what are your strengths?
Step 1, pause. Take a breath. Don't rush. Step 2. Use a thinking phrase. From my experience, I would say my biggest strength is communication.
Step 3. Add structure. First, I've always found it easy to explain complex ideas in simple language. Then, in my last role, I used that skill to train new team members. Finally, I received positive feedback from my manager about how quickly the new staff learned.
That answer is clear, warm, personal, and structured, and it took maybe 20 seconds to say. It doesn't need to be longer than that. Interviewers appreciate clarity.
And notice, we didn't use any complicated vocabulary, no impressive idioms, no academic language. Just simple, clear, structured sentences. That's what real confidence sounds like.
Here's another think about this moment. Most English learners think that sounding confident means using big words, but real confidence actually sounds calm, simple, and clear. Complex vocabulary can actually hide your real ability if it's forced.
The interviewer isn't testing your dictionary. They're testing whether you can communicate clearly and handle a real conversation. And clear, simple English does that better than nervous, complicated English every single time.
Now let's talk about something that goes a little deeper. Because even with all these tools, some people still struggle. And the reason is often something we need to address directly.
Many English learners carry a belief that says, "My English isn't good enough yet." And they use that belief as a reason to wait to apply for jobs, wait to speak in meetings, wait until they feel ready.
But here is the hard truth wrapped in a kind delivery. Feeling ready is not something that comes before action. It comes from action. You do not wait until you feel confident to practice. You practice until you feel confident.
James Clear puts it this way in Atomic Habits. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. Every time you answer an interview question out loud, even alone in your room, you are casting a vote for the identity of a confident English speaker.
That is not just motivational language. That is how identity actually changes. Not just through one big moment, but through thousands of small, consistent actions that say to your brain, "This is who I am."
And that identity shift is the most important transformation this whole episode is pointing toward. Not just a better interview technique, a new way of seeing yourself as a speaker.
Because once you start identifying as someone who practices daily, who uses structure, who stays calm under pressure, your behavior follows that identity automatically.
You stop asking, "Am I good enough for this interview?" And you start asking, "How do I prepare for this interview?" That's a completely different internal conversation.
And that shift from self-doubt to self-preparation, that is what taking action every day builds, one small vote at a time.
Okay, we're moving toward the end of today's episode, and I want to make sure you leave with something very concrete. So let's pull everything together into your 3-step action plan starting today.
Action step 1. Practice answering one interview question every day. Pick a new question each day from common interview questions and answer it out loud using the first, then, finally structure.
Action step 2. Record yourself speaking. Use your phone. It doesn't need to be perfect. Just record, listen back, and notice one thing you want to improve next time.
Action step 3. Replace panic with pause plus structure. In any English conversation today, practice the pause, practice the thinking phrase. Make these things automatic so that when a real interview comes, they are already part of how you speak.
3 steps. Simple, small, but if you do them every day, the slight edge says they will compound into something far bigger than you expect.
And now we want to say something to you directly, something we genuinely mean.
You are not behind. You are not too shy. You are not too late. You are someone who is building a new skill through consistent daily practice.
Every time you press play on this podcast, every time you answer a question out loud, every time you choose practice over procrastination, you are becoming someone new.
You are becoming a calm, clear, and confident English speaker. Not someday, right now, with each step you take.
And we want to see that transformation happen for you. That's genuinely why we're here on English Chats Daily.
Before we go, we want to mention something useful. We've linked the books we discussed today, Atomic Habits by James Clear and The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, in the pinned comment below this video.
Both books are genuinely life-changing, not just for interviews, but for building any skill over time. We highly recommend reading them alongside your English practice.
And if you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe to English Chats Daily. We put out episodes like this regularly, designed to help you build real speaking confidence in real situations.
Share this episode with someone who has a job interview coming up or someone who's working on their English confidence, because sometimes the right podcast at the right moment changes everything.
We'll see you in the next one. Keep practicing, keep showing up, and remember, confidence isn't a feeling you wait for. It's a habit you build.
Take care, and we'll talk soon.